Hi, Mark here from Desert Molding Concepts. Today I'd like to talk about my Bilstein shock package for the XP900 two-seater. Well, of course, by far, Bilstein has the most proven shock in off-road history, period. They were the first to truly separate the oil and gas in their shocks, making for a very smooth, consistent operating shock. Patented valving in the Bilstein has to date never been matched by any other manufacturer. Its active nature is truly unique, and it senses and reacts to varying terrain with ease. Now you combine that with the zinc alloy body, it makes actually for a cooler running shock overall. So in 07 we were actually setting up a Rhino to do some racing, and of course shocks were on the list of upgrades that we wanted to make. I'd read an article in a UTV magazine of the day, and they'd done a shootout that pitted the Bilstein against two of the top manufacturers of reservoir style shocks. And they hot lapped all the shocks and brought them off, and they did shock body and shaft temperatures, and the Bilstein actually proved to run cooler than both of the reservoir style shocks. It also performed as well, if not better, in all categories. So for me, it seemed like a good choice. Well, we actually ran a set of these for a full 8-race series with 0 issues, and we were constantly being complimented on how well our suspension worked on our Rhino. And the only thing I could say to people was Bilsteins. So now, in my opinion, the stock suspension package was completely wrong for the XP for a few reasons. First, I felt the stock shocks had a ton of compression dampening adjustment, but in my opinion that was completely opposite to what the XP actually needed. The full-length, progressively wound springs were harsh and unpredictable, and because there was no way to limit the travel of the softer windings in the spring, it constantly went into coil bind, making for some really hard banging right just prior to going into full compression of the suspension, and making a lot of harsh feedback. Now, I also felt that the suspension was too topped out and really wasn't allowing the suspension to work properly. I knew building in a little droop or sag into the suspension was going to be important. With topped out suspension, especially in the front end, when you encounter rough terrain, whether it be holes, hoops, or otherwise, the tendency is for the whole car to want to dive down into those holes or hoops. Now, if you can add a little sag or droop into your suspension and you attack that same section, then the suspension is more likely to walk through those sections, keeping the chassis on a more level plane so you can attack and get through that section. I also felt having an adjustment on the ride height would allow me to get a little bit of rake on the chassis. And I also felt this would be critical to making weight transfer happen and set the RZR up to attack terrain. Right, well, after cycling the suspension with the stock shocks, I found that the rear axles had a very severe angle of about 28 degrees at full extension of the suspension. And in my opinion, that was a bit severe for any CV, and I thought it could lead to binding and braking of the CVs and axles. So the Bilstein actually addresses that because it's built a 1/4 inch shorter overall in extended length. Once it's bolted up to the rear car, this basically brings the axle angles into a little more respectable 25.5 degrees. Now in the front, we simply had to match the overall extended length that was necessary on the XP, which we did with all Bilstein extensions and eyes. So finally, we had to match the overall travel requirements of the XP, which was 7 inches. Well, the Bilstein is actually an 8-inch travel shock overall, which is more than enough needed for the XP. So we needed to limit that somewhat. So I designed and developed a shock body extension that simply fits to the end of the shock, and now that allows us to match the overall travel that we were trying to achieve for the XP. So now I could have set up the Bilsteins with a dual rate setup, but I did have some reservations. First of all, I wasn't sure that I was going to achieve the overall ride height adjustment that I wanted. And secondly, as we all know, the XP has a very boxy, short wheelbase, and I wanted to keep body roll to a minimum under hard cornering situations. So I felt that a high quality single rate spring working with the unique valving on the Bilstein was going to be the best combination. I really knew it could lead to being a solid performer with less mechanical parts to deal with. So I fitted the Bilstein with the E-Box single rate springs. They're a proven performer. They resist coil bind and they retain their free height very well and have very little sag or set. If you're looking for a rock solid shock package that combines quality components, years of proven performance, is simple and straightforward in design, is low maintenance with less external failure points, it reacts and performs excellent in all terrains, provides years of trouble-free service, this might be the package you want to consider. And of course, the Bilsteins and E-Box are built and factory serviced right here in the U.S. So if you have any questions, you can give us a call at 760-955-1409 or check us out at desertmoldingconceptsinc.com. Anyway, thanks for your time and you have a good day.